You know that what happened to me, this is the story of life. I went to the bank because I needed, this is in San Miguel, and I said, could you please give me 15,000 pesos, just $1,500. They say, we want to, but you don't have it. And I came home, and I was painting, and I saw this Federal Express envelope, and I have tons of them, but this one hadn't been opened. I opened it up, and there was a $5,000 check in it that I'd forgotten about. All of a sudden, I was saved, like in a day, in a second. Story of my life. Unlike practically everybody in the world, my life has been 100% homogeneous with being creative. The point with me is, and with many other artists as well, the creative pool, the creative resource is infinite, and the waters and energy from that resource can flow and be utilized in many different mediums. It's actually not being multi-talented. That's stupid. It's just a very deep creative reservoir that can be, like oil, can be used to fuel many different mediums. But why I am different from Leonardo da Vinci, and I'm not saying comparable, but I have one ace in the hand that he did not. He was not an athlete. He was not a world-class athlete, nor was he an Olympic medalist.
The very first time I saw him skate was at Lakeshore Lions Arena, and they had Jay Humphreys and David McGilvery and some of the top male skaters of the time that were so clean-cut and just very 1960s in appeal, and out came this free spirit from Montreal who nobody had ever seen before, who was dressed differently than anybody else on the ice, and who was moving his body and putting his body in positions that no male skater had ever done before.
In his day, I mean, he was, in my mind, a phenomenon. And I guess I was, being young, in awe basically of what he was doing on the ice. He knows how to put people onto a trip. It's always an experience that you don't forget.
The passion, the emotion, being able to take raw emotion and now give it a form on the ice. You'd watch that and just know, okay, that's what pain feels like, that's what love feels like, that's what angst feels like. He was able to put form to it. It didn't matter if it was 6 in the morning or whether it was an Olympic performance. Every day he seemed to give that same kind of passion, that same kind of drive and intensity every time he skated.
We were artists experimenting within that medium, but there was no ideological direction we were going in. We were just artists expressing ourselves. We did not believe that movement was masculine or feminine. But other people in the world, Russians, English, Americans, especially Americans, would have at that time thought that if a man raised his arm, that was feminine, but if it was below the shoulder, it was masculine.
They didn't know what to do with him. He had broken through the mold. He was still doing all the technical tricks that every other guy was doing, but he was doing them with such flair and panache, and doing it from a place that was rooted in history and in art and in culture that skaters had never been, exposed to.
Certainly with the establishment within skating, and let's face it, the establishment with skating, by and large, are people that were non-skaters. People that judged were losers, basically, people that never made it. And those people would not have been enlightened.
Skating, from the time that I knew him, was never a peaceful thing. It was always a stress to perform. A couple times I even saw him canceling shows just because the stress level was too high. Where painting, he could get up easily early in the morning, drink a dozen cup of coffee, and just go at it for hours.
I would go over to his house, and if he wasn't out practicing at the rink, it seemed he'd be there with, paint under his fingernails, wearing some old paint-splattered chinos and a sweatshirt, doing his thing, dragging his hand through his hair as he always did, just being inspired and gleaning inspiration from just, everything around him. An artist, truly an artist through and through. Like it just saturated every fiber of his being, that artistry and that desire to to express something deeper and something larger than life.
I always admired him for his discipline, skating and painting. Like he would paint 5 hours a day plus 6 hours skating. I went many times with him to the skating ring, and he would swirl around and how was this and how was that. I admired him, I really did. To me, he was the snow prince.
I was introduced to Toller by Robert Desrosiers. I think Toller must have felt that he could play with me, that we could explore that visual camera angle. I understood and digged his kind of directions. He directed some of my photo shoots. He was like an incredible performer, and I could not stop shooting him. I think I must have shot 15 rolls of film, bang, 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 because Toller is truly a dancer, and his spirit and his beauty is in his body. It's like in every muscle, and he has such an understanding of presenting and bring that out in performing. He gave me a lot to work with.
He was such a celebrity. Everywhere I went with him, people would want to talk to him and come up to him, and he was constantly, sort of having to fend off people because everyone wanted a little piece of him. It really felt like I was with some kind of a rock star. And the way he dressed, he had such a fantastic sense of style, sense of fashion, really, truly sense of himself. And he would go walking, down Carlton Street with his two beautiful English setters, Lapis and Minkus, and he was just a vision. And it was something that I think everyone, in Toronto was so starved for. Still, all these years later, still I think we're starved for that. These people that are larger than life, these glorious, colorful characters. I mean, Canadians aren't known for their theatrical qualities oftentimes, and certainly they're not known for dressing, to the max and being that over the top. But Toller was all those things, just a great character.
He was influenced, loved music, loved to dance, loved to go partying. And I say when he went partying, we would always go to, this would be after performances or whatever. He would always arrive in the limo and would like to make an arrival or make an entrance.
Toller Cranston, ladies and gentlemen.
I have moved ahead. I am no longer that person. And as I do this interview, I can't stand the thought that a camera is on my 57-year-old face. And it would be most unlikely that if this documentary comes to be, that I will ever see it. Not because I don't respect what the director is doing, but I don't want to see myself. I'm uncomfortable. And I don't lust and hunger to be a star. I don't want that. I'm uncomfortable with that, and it isn't me anymore. People that come in the door never buy. It's the people that are invited to come in the door. Art really depends on where it's shown. I mean, if something's in the Louvre, even me, you probably would think it would be pretty good. If something's in an environment that is absolutely, like some dive, some diner or something, it doesn't have the same impact. If one were to drag a Leonardo da Vinci out onto Queen Street East, out on the pavement, out on the street. Hi, come on in. You'd think it was a piece of shit.
The importance of the show for me at this point is huge. It allowed me to open a gallery in a developing area of Toronto with a major international artist who has a following, who has a track record, and whose work is at the pinnacle of his creative process. Part of the fun with working with Toller is that his mind is as detailed and as elaborate as the detail in his paintings, if not more so. So you never know who's going to be there with you that day and what's going to come out, but that's what part of the journey is, and I think that's the fun of it.
It could be a little bit this way, but let's just leave it.
Yeah,
and then
Yeah, no, we can move it over.
yeah.
What I really enjoyed about the hanging process is that he didn't care if it was a quarter of an inch off. He was fine about that, whereas other artists are very specific, and especially when you're hanging small pictures and you're hanging them in a group, you have to get them exactly right. And I don't use a tape measure, I do it by eye, and so sometimes you make more than one hole. And he literally went up to the wall and went,
There. An artist is never really aware of what period you're in because you're simply doing it. It takes years, but then what we have and what other people don't have is that your work freezes and records your life in a visual. I mean, you literally can go back to, well, in January 1999, this is what I did and this is where I was. Toothaches and weather, once they're over, you forget them. But the painting actually freezes the moment in a way that skating certainly never did. Like live performing doesn't do that. You're only as good as your last performance. I become so absolutely terrified at Canadian customs, I start shaking.
I do too, I don't like it at all.
No,
I don't mind Canadian, I hate the American customs.
well, I mean, that's even worse. But I mean, I find that I don't even know if I should lie to my own advantage or tell the truth. And like he said to me, how long have you lived in Mexico? And I'm thinking, should I tell the truth or should I lie? "17 years ago, I basically divested myself of all my objects in Toronto at the age of 40 at a huge auction sale at Waddington's and came to San Miguel. I didn't know anything about Mexico, and I somehow fell in love, like everybody else, with San Miguel, and then thought that I would live here.
Sometimes Canadians like it when Canadian artists go away. I think that has to do with our colonial heritage. We always perceive the center as being elsewhere. It's never us. And it doesn't surprise me that he chooses to live outside of the country so much.
I am forever being dazzled by what Mexico offers in every way, visually, culturally, architecturally, horticulturally, everything. The biggest influence, which is absolutely an appendage, almost like another arm of my life, my existence, my being here, is this garden in which I live. The garden wields a huge influence in every conceivable way. One sees color combinations that you would never see in, say, normal life, but yet the discovery of color in nature has a huge influence on the colors you choose for paintings. Irregular shape is something which is very important to me and is always found in my images. The property, in all its complexity and confusion, is really a property where kids walk in the door and get sucked into a certain enchantment and can play hide and seek in. Everything is designed Of course, not like Disneyland, but like legit enchantment. The childlike enchantment does not mean that an adult cannot experience the same thing. And everything has a sort of sophisticated sense of amusement. Does Mexico, does San Miguel, does my house, does my garden influence me? A big fat yes. We can hang whatever we want to, but one also has to think in terms of selling. And I mean, people may consider buying a $1,200 painting and not a $12,000 painting. And even in galleries and things in Toronto, they don't sell off the walls.
No, what's the price range in those?
Well, normally they're $95, but I'm going to make them $8.
That's very affordable.
I said just to maybe give a chance. Yeah.
So what you're saying?
Toller knows that he's a commodity. I think that he knows what he represents and where his niche is in the world. Do I think that he paints with a price tag attached to the canvas? No. Do I think that that happens after he's, completed the creativity? Yes. Is he aware of it? You bet. You don't last as long as he's lasted as an artist without knowing where your pennies are, and he's definitely aware of that.
I'm in this very hard price range. It's as though you plow into a wall. Anything from 10,000 to 20 is like sort of frozen, and to get over 20 is really hard. Many people that I would know of, or certainly would suspect, would accuse me of being commercial, which then negates being a valid artist, because in their minds, to be a sincere and real artist, you have to be Van Gogh, cut off your ear and starve to death. That, of course, is ridiculous, because the criteria for genuine art basically would be a three-pronged fork, which would have genuine originality, a style that is easily identifiable, but then, most important, a technical excellence that is conspicuous.
I always thought his work had a great sense of color, great sense of joy, very detailed. Again, that, painstaking care that he took, be very meticulous about things.
Well, when I look at Toller and his work, I think of Russian. When I was in Russia, I said, Toller, I saw you everywhere. Everywhere.
The work is loud. It jumps at you. I think it's pretty black and white. I think in general, people will either turn around, run the other way, or actually enter it, just take it and go for the ride, because his work is a journey.
We don't have a long tradition in this country of fantastic art, of art that is about the imaginative or creates dreamscapes. We have a very strong tradition of minimalism, conceptual art, and very cold art, what Robertson Davies once called frozen art for a frozen people. And Toller Cranston creates warm, colorful, vibrant, beautiful, arabesque kind of art. And as a critic, I look at that and think to myself, well, knowing the traditions he comes out of and knowing how long he's been making this work, he really is completely an outsider.
I recall reading an article about a Canadian artist, Charlie Pachter, fuming and spewing because the establishment didn't understand him and didn't understand the Queen on the Moose or something like that, or why wasn't he recognized. The establishment truly had it right with him, and also I don't take him seriously at all. That said, I'm in the same boat. What I really covet and what I really want is that serious artistic brains can look at what I've done in my life and analyze it in a serious, educated, historical way. I do want to be taken seriously because I myself take myself very seriously.
Part of the problem with Toller's artwork getting the respect it deserves is the fact that he has a long history as a figure skater, and his public personality is that of a figure skater. And when you're working in a field that Toller works in, which is primarily sort of fantasy art, then there's an automatic reading of that work as being airy, not thoughtful, not rigorous, and campy.
Being creative and being true to your creative resources is the only thing that makes any sense. The people with the money, all they can do is to buy the stuff. We make it. And the talent and the creative luxury of making it far exceeds any amount of money anywhere in any bank. It is the creative people of the world that are the richest, and far richer than anybody that has a huge bank account. Patty, do you think that's I think that was a bit too low. Actually, I can become hysterical over very small things, but anything big, I am the voice of reason and as cool as an iceberg. An acquaintance of mine smashed in my house a $5,000 vase, a modern thing. And she became hysterical and oh my God, and I didn't bat an eyelash because it was broken and what are you going to do? I mean, there was no recourse, there was nothing that could be done. So, gone. I mean, what can you do? Nothing.
You know, Toller had a big auction at Waddington's years ago and sold everything that he owned to raise money for his place in Mexico. And the idea was that he was going minimalist. Well, when you walk into his place in San Miguel, I mean, your eyes just dart everywhere because there are bowls and sculptures and paintings and photographs. And I mean, it's beautiful. And I just looked at him and I said, well, you've been busy. You know, what happened to your minimalist? And he goes, oh, I just got over that.
My sense of design re-houses is exactly the same as the paintings, exactly the same as the garden, which is launched from artistic self-indulgence. So the environments here are done for only one person, which is me. And it's an entirely different kind of environment than almost any other house, certainly any other house in this town. And I mean, I won't say the world, but it could be ballpark world, because the resident is the very person who creates the things, which is entirely different than the resident buying them or the resident hiring decorators to acquire things. Beautiful things also have nothing to do with money. It's much more a question of an eye that can find them, and in this town you can find them on the street corner. Buying in quantity, one might say it's a classic example of obsessive compulsiveness, but in fact, what it is with certain places where the workmanship is so great and the prices are so great, you would be remiss and foolish not to buy these totally great things, which in the final analysis are components of a collection. Muy increíble. ¿Tiene los nuevos cosas?
Las de
Por señor Klein, así, es más o menos listo.
Well, when one is always buying and trying to make oneself beautiful with properties and objects, usually it means something's missing in your life. And I'm the first one to remind him of that. And I just think that when he goes on the spending sprees, I don't feel good about it because I know it's basically he's feeling inadequate. That's the way Toller is. It's all or nothing. He buys, money is to spend, and you only live for the moment. You can't take it with you.
This is something that I've always thought was so outrageous about Toller. And it was wonderful, really, because it showed to me that he didn't really take money that seriously, or he didn't maybe value it all that much, although he worked very, very hard for his money. He would always have wads of bills, like, crunched up inside his pockets. Like, he would never have a wallet. He certainly never had a proper billfold, but he would just, like, pay for things that he would just dig into his pockets and pull out, like, crunched up dollar bills or $10 bills or 20s or 50s or hundreds. I don't know what they were, but that was his money.
You know, he can, over a weekend, sell a couple works and have $25,000 in his pocket. And a couple weeks later be looking for change, you know, to buy a sandwich.
There's something that a woman here in San Miguel once sat down with me, and she said, "You have such a lack of self-respect. You don't like yourself, and you hate money. You have no respect for money." That is an interesting concept, but both accusations are absolutely true. I always think, I mean naively, because other people think that having a bank account is a better idea, and it probably is, but I always think that I'll spend it and I'll just add something else to the property. And yes, I don't have any money, but don't worry, next week I'll make some. I'll work 3 times harder and I'll get it back. That has very much been a consistent scenario that has played out for 57 years.
Personally, I could never do that, but with him, that seems to be a philosophy. I find it quite scary, but I think it works for him. It's almost excessive to the point of I don't feel comfortable being with him when he goes on these shopping sprees. And I have experienced them. I kind of have to just sort of step back and just let him do it by himself because I just find it depressing.
In the early days of my life, obsessive compulsiveness was an unknown state of being. I mean, we didn't really know that terminology. No one ever told me, you know, you have a problem and you're doing something wrong and you are suffering from obsessive compulsiveness. I mean, I didn't know what that was. I continue to suffer from that. I continue to, in fact, the leopard has not changed its spots in that department. But on the other hand, isn't it in many ways wonderful in that someone actually does it where somebody else doesn't? It's really part of the texture and fabric of the human condition, and people should not be the same. I mean, one of these days, and it's probably not in the near future, I may wake up, I may face reality, and I may grow up, but I'm not there yet. This rug was, it looks Inuit. Can you imagine that this is done on one loom? No. But I've had another carpet, and it went to Winnipeg, and I licked it before it went. I liked it so much. No one could criticize me for not being madly creative. It's a tsunami wave of creativity. that I possess. But as an artist, I also don't question images or themes. I mean, this sounds arrogant, but in fact it's fraught with experience. I never question my hand. I never doubt it. It starts, and that's what comes out. I think creativity on a high level has to be done in a solitary way. It must be done unto the individual. I have learned as an artist that, and I learned this, I cannot have any music playing if I am genuinely conceptualizing or creative. Everything is a distraction. A stranger could be down in the garden path and my hair will stand on end and I'll become hysterical and, want to murder them or something. Being alone with your thoughts, being alone so the channel is clear so that there can be no interruption or no interference is the only way that you can create. Most of the artists in San Miguel, which it's not a criticism but rather an observation, are pretty one-dimensional. That is, the painter paints or the sculptor sculpts. But I have always embraced and tried many different things, not out of the desire to be creative, but within a vocabulary that is very specific.
He has dreams, and he thinks in his dreams what he's going to do next. I don't know anybody who designs the lamps, the carpets, the eggs, the whatever, the jackets, the leather jackets that he designed. I have 2 of them. Well, I mean, it's multiple. It's not one thing. It's not just a painting and an athlete, but he's a designer, he's a decorator, he's more than that.
His design is phenomenal because it goes in every single direction. It's not just confined to the canvas. He's doing 3-dimensional pieces, he's doing small pieces, doing large scale, and I think that magical quality that he creates through his design aesthetic is what attracts people to him.
I want a whole collection of 6 or 7 new sculpture things which are going to go to an exhibition in Toronto. This unique, incredible town, and which is just replete with creative energy. There are people here in the town that can interpret to perfection whatever the design is or whatever the designer has designated for them.
Well, his mind is way out there. All the time the pieces are totally different, and it's always a piece that you never see before. And it's always like, I have the piece, and then he had pieces of glass, he started adding things that turn the piece into an incredible thing.
The truth is that his ability to take the idea and process it into so many different areas, to take what was originally a concept for a line drawing and to think about it becoming a 3-dimensional object and to think about the color how it's going to best pop for the person that's bought it. All of those things are really intrinsic to how he thinks.
Here in Mexico, we have our own idea out of people, like especially artists. Yeah, they believe they're very eccentric and sometimes a little bit crazy too, craziness. But I think he's great, yeah.
Why is he so driven? In some ways, is a mystery. And I think, the side of him that is so driven, the side of him that is so impulsive, has worked for him. And at the same time, has destroyed him sometimes, I mean, without that compulsive personality, he would have never have become the artist that he is. He would have never painted the way that he has. But at the same time, if that energy goes in the wrong way, it eats him alive.
I've often thought of somebody doing a movie, not about me, but about somebody like me, but I shall tell you, and then we will not discuss it anymore, is that I can go from morning till night working in whatever creative capacity I do. And the horrible state of that, although it commands great respect from other artists, especially resentful artists, is that, because of being so productive, it's awful. It's like the red shoes. I can't stop it. I have become a victim and prisoner of my creative energy, and I can't turn it off. I mean, I laugh at myself, by myself, because in this studio, I will look at a picture, and what I do is I walk a certain distance, and I look at the picture, and I'm trying to get out of the studio, but the studio is holding me like it's in a magnetic vacuum. Sometimes I can get out the door, but the door's open, and the power of the painting is still beckoning. And many times I've been out that door at 10 o'clock and I go back and just do a little bit more. A painting that demands energy or attention because it's not finished will be turned to the wall. That means they can't speak to me because there's no voice. And the only way I could stop it would be, I hardly can say this, substance abuse, alcohol, or someone knocking on my door. Any kind of substance abuse is really contingent upon how the person can take it. For myself, that period is interesting because now I understand things differently, and for me, it is like a teacup full of tea, and the tea is a metaphor for problems, frustrations, and almost being paralyzed in a position that you cannot cope with. That the only way to deal with the teacup that's going to overflow is to kill yourself with alcohol or drugs. I mean, other people can do it with sex or religion, but that was not for me. As soon as life is harmonious, it's quite fantastic, is that it doesn't enter the head. Like, you don't think about that. As soon as life becomes impossible, you do think about it. Similarly, body weight. And this is often something that the male skaters would never really think about, but I was always tortured by that, is I'm too fat, I'm too fat, I'm too fat, I have to lose weight. My mother, from the time that I was 12, always called me 3-bun. 3-bun meant that I would eat 3 rolls at the dinner table in succession, and that I was fat, and that I was overweight, and that I could never get anywhere because I was fat. That is how I felt, and that is how I always felt. Actually, to this day, I feel I still have the same problem. But if one is to inspect and review films of me, or if you would like to see photographs of me at my prime, I probably had an 18-inch waist. Ending this subject, any experience that we are involved in, we experience in our life, is positive if it is part of your journey. The tragedy of anybody that may experiment with any kind of substance, alcohol, whatever, is if they get stuck there. And I don't think that I'm a saint. In fact, I'm quite sure that I'm not. But if you'd like to look around and you see this property, you see what's been done, you see the hundreds of exhibitions that I've had, you would have a sense of discipline. You must realize that basically I am indecently disciplined and together. I've had exhibitions which I've been hugely successful, and I've had exhibitions that I thought I was to be hugely successful and have sold nothing. So it's a crapshoot.
How are you, honey? I am so proud of you.
They're definitely Queen Street. My love. Perhaps my love. It's you.
It's me.
I think that he's always had an audience of the skating world. He will always have that. He revolutionized skating. Anybody that was there for that renaissance that he kind of spearheaded, definitely have respect for what he did as an artist, as on the ice and as well as an artist on the canvas.
It feels like I'm surrounded by a real colorful vision, like a dream of what figure skating could be. Like I always feel like I'm at home in his paintings. And it's that relationship between skater and art. And then I walk in and I feel like I know him personally and I know skating and I just love being around his art. So we have 2 of his paintings in our house and we're shopping for a 3rd today.
The coldness of winter and the bleakness was countered by violent color, which play against one another. And everyone says, at least in Russia, and historically, I was more Russian than the Russians, either as a skater or as an artist. But actually, they're conspicuously Russian.
His style doesn't surprise me, because if you know Toller, I guess when you see him skate, you kind of get an indication of his spirit and his soul. And that certainly does come across in his art. He's very obviously flamboyant and unpredictable. And that's the wonderful thing about his work. And the great thing too is that he's always changing. And his style is always changing. And that's why I've sort of been keeping up to date with his work.
I must say, when you go to museums, the only people that are taken seriously are people that paint 25 feet by 25 feet. But the 25-foot paintings really don't have a commercial value because who can fit them in? But if you paint small, then you're not taken seriously. But for me, if I start going bigger, it's technically hard for me because I have to schlep it around.
Yes.
And also, it terrifies people.
Right.
I mean, they get nervous when they see something like that. But the thing is, which most people don't know, if it goes in the door, it can fit on the wall.
Of course. Having an art exhibition is a performance, it's a show. And also for him, the artist, in a sense, the work is done. So it's really just about mingling and talking to people, and it is a performance. There's no question about that. And of course, his new shoes, he won't stop talking about them.
It is perhaps a little bit too cavalier to say that artists don't care what people think. Because the nature of an artist, the essence of an artist, is to express something and do something that is going to affect people, command an attention from them, and possibly, which we really don't want to say it, we want what we do to evoke a reaction to make the pat on the head come more quickly. The artist who has created something and maybe even has a reputation or has done something with quality is rendered completely vulnerable because all you can do within that exhibition is wait and hope that somebody comes. Wait and hope that somebody likes or approves of what you do. You hope that somebody will buy one of your paintings.
I think that Toller is most comfortable when he's in a studio because you don't have to answer to anybody. He can be his own person. And I think he's just happy on his own when he's painting, and he's got lots of things in his head that he needs to get out.
Traveling out of Mexico, having to live or live outside of his property in some ways sometimes very difficult for him. I think he does need that island, shall we say, that place where he can be totally himself and not deal with the outside world.
What's the most important is the work. Everything else, well, the friendship is important, but really we have to do the work because you're only as good as your last piece. You cannot write on what has been. That's done. No matter what, whatever goes on, the show must go on.
The artist's life, incidentally, is quite the loneliest there is. That said as well, this incredible property that I live in that has a terrace here and a patio there and a sitting area inside, and the list goes on. I do own it, and I did create it, but I don't live it. I'm here, all I do is work. Someone else can sit in those places. I am always wondering, just like retiring from skating, you're always wondering when you're not going to be able to do it anymore. When is it, what day in the calendar, what moment, what month is it that I will vacate this property, and when the day comes, I will hand over the keys and walk out the door, and I will not look back. I will look forward to the next creative challenge, and I don't feel like this is the last stop on the train. I do want to be taken seriously as an artist, but yet I really don't have to have somebody, put the seal of approval on me, because my life is the real deal. I am that. I know that. And if nobody else knows it, I know it.